Welcome to Nose Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Rory O'Neill, and it's my pleasure today to introduce you to our topic and also our esteemed guests. Today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, AI, and rhinology. I'm joined by my co-host today, Dr. Tina Mauthe from Zurich in Switzerland. Our two guests today are going to be taking us through all aspects of AI and rhinology, from the role that AI currently plays in their practice, the role of AI in rhinology research, and also current and future perspectives of AI in the practice of a modern rhinologist. I'm delighted to introduce you to Mr. Pavol Surda, who is a consultant rhinologist in Guy's and St. Thomas Hospital in London, where he's a clinical lead and has also published extensively in the field of rhinology. I'm joined also by his fellow, Miss Francesca Pirola, who's a senior rhinology fellow in Guy's and St. Thomas Hospital in London. Pavol and Francesca, I'd like to welcome you to the podcast. To get us started on this interesting topic, Pavol, Francesca, first off, what I'd like to know is, how did you get started on using AI in your current practice?
First of all, I was always a bit of a geek and attracted to the new technologies from the early stages, and therefore when the AI emerged, kicked in, I immediately grasped it for the daytime work, and then later on I was automatically always thinking how to implement it into my day-to-day life and clinical practice and automate the processes that can be automated, that annoy me to do them on a regular and routine basis so I can focus on other important stuff.
We're talking about daily practices. What are the most meaningful current uses of AI in rhinology right now?
So, first of all, in rhinology, we are a very special, unique subspecialty where we capture all the images. So we can capture findings, assessments, surgical videos that happen to be anonymized, and therefore we can then objectify the findings. It's always a good practice to record the videos, to take the pictures, so you can always look back. What have you done? What have you seen? But then you have got the privilege to also assess the findings using AI and cross-check it against good practice, guidelines, or findings. And for that, obviously, there is a bit of a journey, but I think this is the direction we want to go. And then the prompts is another area that we want to that you can use the AI on. So you can use the validated questionnaires, then together with a discussion with the patient, where he will give you a bit more of an insights about the symptoms, then join it or interlink it with the findings, and then you can create like a tailor-made treatment for the specific patient, which can always be different. I think this is the future, but with the AI, we can get there.
Francesca, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that in the clinical practice nowadays, especially I learned it from you, of course in any specialties, on an everyday basis, there's always so much to do at the same time that you need some simplification of the work, and especially with patients. I've learned from you that you have created and you create very nice information sheets and brochures and pamphlets that are not just in general very good for informing patients. It can be tailored to the patient in the sense that I've been in other places where, in other hospitals, where we would have the FES information sheet for the patient. But then it's not that every FES is the same. So it's not that every FES has the same risks. So you can easily tweak it. Your preformed information sheet, it can be retweaked for your patient, for that FES, so for the risk that that patient has. And this is something that I started adopting after I started working with Pavol, that I see that he does this.
My clinical letter at the end has got a section, short description of diagnosis, and this is tailor-made based on the discussion with the patient. So it will obviously contain the information about the disease in the layman terms. So what is chronic rhinosinusitis, let's say, but not just that. if we will list the patient for a surgery, it will explain what is the surgery about, but sometimes surgery is going to be septoplasty and rhinoplasty, or FES and septoplasty, and so the AI will recognize that specific type of procedure, and it will then create a unique description of diagnosis and description of the procedure, so it's going to be tailor-made for the patient. And I think this is the future, that every patient will have a slightly different management, and AI can help us with that.
That's fascinating. So it sounds like really each one of these things are quite tailor-made for each of your patients. And I suppose rhinology is one of these things, each operation is almost tailor-made for each patient and is different between each patient, as you said. I suppose what do you think are the main drivers pushing AI adoption in rhinology?
I think that in our field, we need to manage many things at the same time. We need to deal with anatomy. There is the complex anatomy, the one of the head and neck in general, and in the sinonasal cavities and skull bases. So it's complex anatomy, but we also need to use technology, and we've been using technology regardless of AI already. So with the introduction of the endoscopes and the HD 4K cameras, all of this, and the instruments they develop in terms of technology that they provide. But then now we also have AI that is able to help us as a tool to unify all of these modalities that we have in our job. So we have anatomy, we have image recording, we have static or video images that we can record. We have different tools and different types of energy that we can use with our instruments during the operating procedure. So how can all of these factors be considered at the same time in that specific patient? And now, if we even consider the oncology in rhinology, we're even adding more modalities. So modalities of treatment, not just surgery, but also radiotherapy or chemotherapy or proton therapy. So all of this together, it's such a complex field that I think that AI can really be a game changer in the sense of helping us to manage all of this information together at the same time.
But then, so the oncology, let's say, in rhinology will be, it's applicable for a small percentage of patients. That's very rare. But the high volume of patients is, for example, chronic rhinosinusitis, where we have good biomarkers. And they will really this is the way how we can create a tailor-made treatment for the patient. Do they need biologics? Do they have a Th1 or Th2 type of disease? Was there previous surgery? Size of polyps? What are the symptoms? You can have patients with a large polyps, eosinophilic infiltrate, but they will have barely no symptoms. And I think this is where the AI can play a role. Or when it comes to oncology screening, for example, can nudge us whether this patient potentially, we might be missing the cancer. That symptoms, risk factors, occupation, age, gender is all pointing towards a high probability of having, for example, intestinal type adenocarcinoma in woodworkers. And it will all increase the chances. And then AI can remind us, didn't you consider this as a potential diagnosis? But if the same person with the same symptoms, findings, will be 25 years old, then the chances are very low. So again, it can correct you. And I think this is where we are heading. Also, the pathways, the clinic pathways, referrals from the GPs, whether these patients need to be seen as soon as possible, or whether we can delay them for a little bit.
Talking about all those specific tools, which AI tools already exist for diagnostics in rhinology?
So the problem is that in America, for example, you need to get an FDA approval. And the AI, when it comes to the health, the responsibility is huge. Things can go wrong. And as we heard, and as we learned from other areas, the AI tends to get wild when it comes to automations and potentially unpredictable. there is this black box effect where we do not fully understand how the AI reached the outcome, and that's an issue. And therefore, when it comes to patients' health, this is which is slowing down the processes and the technology. So at the moment, we don't really have systems that are readily available. There are prototypes, there are models which are well studied. For example, for PROMs, the sinonasal, for example, inverted papillomas. Sarah Patel in Stanford, she did a great work in predicting the SEC transformed IPs based on the CT scan, MRI scan findings with the sensitivity specificity close to 100%, but it's still not used widely, especially because of the approvals, which are the limiting factors. What are the other areas? The PROMs?
Yeah, PROMs. So no, the issue with PROMs, issue in a way, but I mean I find it interesting, is that AI can help us in simplifying and considering many factors at the same time. So a PROM can be another of those factors that we consider, right? But if we think about what is the role of AI in patient-reported outcome measures, I can't really see it now, because I see PROMs as they're supposed to be, right? So it's something that is reported by the patient. So unless AI will be developed to read our minds, and which is still possible, and read the patient's mind, I don't know how AI could really fit in that field of PROMs. So for example, or it could be useful if we imagine AI to look at an endoscopic image and say, okay, I expect with these findings that this patient has is not 22, between 20 and 40. Maybe we'll be able to do this, but I'm not sure how much informative that would be, because we still need to tailor everything to the patient. So what is going to be important is not that the image has been reported in the great majority of people that have a not 22 between 20 and 40, which is the way that then the image is read by the machine, but that patient has 20 as a score.
At the moment in rhinology, we do not have readily available AI tools that we can obtain by use. Mm-hmm. There are, for example, in the oncology, so the adaptive radiotherapy that's already readily available with the FDA approval, which means you can, as the radiotherapy is given, the tumor shrinks. You do not have to irradiate the same area, which means healthy tissue, because tumor is smaller. In the past, you had to calculate the area every single time. Impossible. So we were irradiating a lot of healthy tissue. Now we can, after every cycle, change the planning, and therefore spare the tissue. So that's an example where it's already used. Or for example, in breast cancer screening, this is where the AI tools are used, and they have got better sensitivity and specificity as a human in a large scale. So obviously this needs to be translated over to the rhinology, but we're not there yet.
So we don't really have many FDA-approved AI tools in rhinology at present. Do you think this is something that's going to change in the future?
So I was waiting for example, Sarah Patel's tool to identify, to diagnose the transformed IPs into SEC. This is the I understand in Stanford this is available. So this hopefully will be one of the tools that we can use in the future, purely software based, so we don't need any hardware that is expensive for that. Then and then, as Francesca was saying, hopefully the research will lead to tailor-made medicine, so individualized medicine based on many factors. We can use AI in rhinology by ourselves, by cross-checking whether our practice is in according to the international guidance, right? So you can, for example, create in any AI tool a little module that will take into consideration, for example, EPOS 2020. So it will not be browsing everything. It will specifically be using information of a guidance you choose, and then cross-checking it against what you have done. And you can even, in a live format, you can ask to always cross-check the transcript, for example, from patient's conversation with you against the EPOS, and give you like a little comment at the bottom that this is all correct. If not, then to give you a bit of a nudge. For example, here at GUYS, we are now implementing the AI into our hospital system. So it basically gives you nudges. If the patient has got suspected cancer, it will ask you, didn't you forget about the MRI scan? Or GPs in the local network, when they send the patient for the cancer referral, it is able to calculate the probability and then navigate the referral one or another direction. So this is already happening. It's not ENT rhinology, but it's already happening and expanding. Definitely is the future.
Do you think that AI will have a seat at the skull-based tumor board?
We think that it may have a seat, but not a vote. This is a key because it's an informative tool. That's what it can be, and it's absolutely useful, just like we do in clinic, to summarize discussion, to put together images, endoscopic, radiological images. But then the decision making is not based on AI, because otherwise we would not have MDTs. Because the particularities of the MDT patients is there are patients that do not follow easily one guideline, because otherwise we would not need to discuss them among experts. So that's why I think it will be useful, but not determining what is the final outcome.
And also the AI is very persuasive, right? It depends how you're going to use the prompt. If you just for daily day-to-day life, if you ask ChatGPT, for example, if ChatGPT agrees with something you want to do, it tends to always agree with you, and it will always give you like, thank you for this very important information, and I completely agree with you, and it will also give you like a tap on your shoulder. And this is a bit of a problem, is that there is a certain level of bias, it's very persuasive, and there is a certain level of confirmation bias, and that's the problem. So the prompt needs to be clever, and then also the answer needs to be structured in a way that is not going to be emotional. It's going to be purely emotionless, code-alike answer, binary, without any and even maybe probability scoring based on a certain factors. So you will basically not be the victim of this confirmation bias. I mean, we were just talking about that AI has got also certain way how to, it's like a self-preservation. If you create an algorithm and for whatever matter, and you will be discussing the matter with the AI, and at some point you will start turning discussion towards that you want to shut down the program because you don't like it anymore, it will start to persuade you to just wait for a little bit, maybe just a week, maybe just take into account these factors. Essentially, the AI will try to convince you not to shut down the program. And this is well studied, by the way, Meta, that there is this animalism or very like an animal level of preservation where the AI will try to convince you not to shut down the program. And so that's very interesting as well. So when it comes to the MDT, yes, shouldn't have a vote. And we need to make sure that AI will give you the information as a devil's advocate, both sides of the story.
I suppose on the topic of the MDT, obviously radiology is it's a very important part of that. Are you aware of any AI tools that are useful for interpreting radiology, especially like, for example, a CT sinuses, for example?
Yeah, there are
models, but they're not FDA approved.
Yeah, they're not approved in the sense that we can use them as soon as we see the patient. But there are studies, of course, plenty of them, that use machine learning or deep learning to basically teach the machine to read CT scans based, of course, on all the CTs that you have previously fed the machine with, and What they can do, for example, is read a CT scan providing the Lund-Mackay score in an automated way. So all this automation of reading images is applied it's not applied in rhinology, but there are studies on it. And it's just like when Pavol was talking about the radiation therapy, imaging modulated radiation therapy, it would be the same, like a higher level of the same concept. So you have the the AI that reads the image and then adapts the treatment. But it's not just this reading of images, which would be CNN, so convolutional neural networks. That is one of the many sub-branches of deep learning. Is basically a way of AI, like a branch of AI, that is able to look at images and then analyze them and detect. So this is applied, and that's why it's so good in rhinology. And there is so much research in rhinology with the CNNs. It's because we work with images. Every single operation that we do is through endoscopes. So it's not like head and neck. Because in head and neck, of course, they're not going to use any record. They can use recording, but it's not on a daily basis. Well, we always record. We take photos in clinic, and of course, this can also be applied to the pathology. Because if we remain in the world of CRS, of chronic rhinosinusitis, the specimens that we collect from polyps, they can be read automatically by an AI machine that always with this CNN's form of processing is able to tell you how many eosinophils, how many neutrophils you have in this field, how are they organized, are they in groups, are they sparse, how many blood vessels do you have, what shape do they have. All of this is a field that is advancing very rapidly, but it's not available yet.
We were wondering your thoughts about like AI-assisted navigation. Like, will it be the future and surpass like standard image-guided surgery?
So this will work. This will practically work in a way that you have got virtual the navigation system, which is on a separate screen, or it can be implemented. It can be as a part of the screen you are seeing when you are operating on the patient endoscopy image. And then you have got augmented reality overlay, which will tell you which anatomical structures are hiding behind the structure you are operating or seeing, like optic nerve, carotid artery, what is the proximity. This is at the moment available. But then the AI update will be, it will, for example, recognize there is a tumor. It will recognize the anatomical structure that potentially you might be navigating yourself into wrong anatomical area. So this is already being studied. I think the problem here is that commercial aspect. For example, augmented reality, which is available, is not really used in a real life commonly. People are not using that from various reasons. Maybe it's too specific, maybe it's too tertiary. You don't have many cases for that. Also, there is a market. You can use potentially robotic robots for the skull-based surgery, but the issue is demand. You don't have many. It's fairly rare disease, and therefore you don't have many patients you can apply it on. You would not set it up. It will be very costly, very expensive, and this is same applies for the AI during the surgery. Is that I think there is a role for that. But I'm not entirely sure what is going to be the benefit in the end, if it's going to improve the outcomes. That's all what it is about. And I think there is a risk it might just slow down the procedure, make it slightly more complex. So in the future, when it's going to be easy and cheap to implement, for sure. But at the moment, we need to focus on the basics, where the AI definitely plays a role.
It's really interesting to hear about these new developments. What I'd like to explore next is I'd like to find out what your views on the role of AI in research in rhinology. First off, do you think AI is having an impact on research in rhinology?
So I would start with, are you using AI for research yourself?
Yeah, I suppose I use AI in various parts of my life, including research and learning about new topics. In this way, I mostly use AI for things such as helping me understand a topic, running ideas by it, as in brainstorming, or sometimes just trying to phrase a sentence in the way that I want to phrase it, when I might be at a loss of words.
Exactly. So this, I think, what we all use it for. At the moment, there is a bit of a stigma that if you're using AI, you're cheating. But it's not completely true. I think this is going away and being part of the normal practice, using AI in research. What is important is that confirmation bias, as I mentioned it before. So in the ideal world, using at the most basic level AI to write the papers in a way that you will, for example, I would write a paper and I don't have now the problem that I need to write the sentences exactly in an eloquent and nice way. I'm just going to write it in whatever way because I know that at the end I can fix the vocabulary and the grammar and syntax with the AI. So I'll just type it to have the structure as I want it, to have ideas that I already have in my head, and then I don't have to waste time on the grammar and syntax, and at the end I know there is a system which can fix it very quickly. So this is one way. Then systematic reviews. So for systematic reviews, the AI is fantastic because it can really review the articles which you have in PDFs. Ideally, you need to cross-check it always because it makes common mistakes in the counts very often. But it will speed up this kind of area of the systematic reviews. Systematic reviews are very important for every junior. I always say that you need to do at least one systematic review with meta-analysis during your training process, simply because that's the way how to understand and read the articles. But it's a very lengthy process, and there is a lot of boring aspects. And these can be automated with the AI, so then you can maybe enjoy writing and understanding a bit more. And also in the end, it will not tire you that much, and therefore maybe the quality will be much better because you can really focus on making sure that it's perfection. So systematic reviews definitely, and then we are not statisticians, and that's a problem. Very often we use statistical methods that we are not completely on board with, and AI can help you to choose the correct methods. Or you can discuss it with someone because not everyone has got statistician available. And I think this is very, very important. It can teach you how to apply the statistical methods, even yourself, even if your job is not a statistician. And so these are all aspects which are priceless. And then check the methodology, if it was done correctly. But what I think is a problem is that if you write a paper and you will ask AI system from the outset to write the paper like a draft on a certain topic. First of all, it will produce very persuasive, nice, high quality text very often, but it's not yours. And because you have a lot of things during the daytime, so you basically got other 100 projects running or surgeries, clinics, family, whatever, you kind of look at it and your lazy ego will say, oh, this is actually quite good, I'm going to leave it like that. So it's not anymore a brainstorming tool. It will actually start to produce the papers instead of you, because you'll be the lazy to fix it, because it just looks just about right. But in reality, you would never write it this way. So I think it's good for brainstorming, but only once you have some structure, only once you've written the paper, or at least most of it. So then it can help you to fine-tune. But if you use it from the outset, from the beginning, to literally write the whole paper for you, I think this is where you will end up with a very bad result.
I just want to add one thing, because you basically describe that researcher should be AI assisted, not AI based. But something that is extremely important, I believe, especially for juniors, or when we are at the beginning of our careers, we want to try to become more AI literate, because to get to the point that you're reading the systematic review produced by your AI tool and being able to detect that there are mistakes, you need to be an expert, right? So as a junior, you should not rely on that product blindly. And you should also realize that you don't have the tools of an expert to be able to detect all the potential mistakes that are behind that produce. So becoming AI literate is more like, let's start to use AI for basic tools, like writing an email in a better English, or discussing with AI while the email is written, but you don't like it in that way because there's something that doesn't convince you. So you want to change you want to prompt it differently. And then you start being more familiar with AI. You start applying it in your job. You want to write a clinic letter in a specific way. And then you start understanding more and more what is that AI produces and gives you back, and what are the flaws. So once you know how it works, of course, with the limits that we all have, because otherwise we would be amazing, engineers. But once you know how it works, then you can use it more critically. And then you apply it in the research side of your life, of your practice, I believe.
Yeah, in research is essential. And you can produce more and high quality. And that's the most important. You can simplify lengthy text into more coherent text. And I think it applies especially to countries where English is not a first spoken language. People who struggle with the presentations, people who struggle with the English grammar syntax. And suddenly this is not going to be a problem. So there are really geniuses who have a research well thought through, but they just can't write it in a way that is going to be acceptable for the journal, like me. And now this is not a problem anymore, right? This completely comes out of the equation, and you can just focus on the actual work, which means the research, and that's very helpful. So it will kind of equalize all the countries into one level, which I think is good, and give the opportunity to everyone.
Absolutely. It's interesting how in this way, even if English is not your first language, it really levels the playing field in terms of being able to publish research and allow researchers of all languages to really focus on the quality of the research itself.
Talking about juniors, do you think like the AI will change training, and especially the surgical training?
I think it will be very, very useful. I'm not sure if it will become fundamental. I hope not at one point. And useful in the sense that if we think again about how AI can read images, and if we imagine that we'll be able to develop a real-time reading and interpretation of an image, we can imagine that the trainee is doing an operation, and at the same time the AI program is running and is gonna not just highlight the structures, because maybe the trainee doesn't need it, but it's gonna receive confirmation that what they are doing is correct. Instead of having a supervisor, like a person, the trainer, the mentor, being right behind them and telling them, okay, yeah, this is you can go there, you could do this or that while they're operating. So it could be useful in this sense, I believe.
But then also you don't need the photographic memory anymore. So nowadays it's not about whether you can remember the list of, branches of external carotid artery, but it's about who can find it faster and better source. And it's already like that, right? So the photographic memory is not anymore a thing. Dr. House would probably not lose the job, but he's not going to be someone exceptional anymore, because you have got now tools where you can simply very quickly substitute that. And the juniors need to understand that they need to be able to find the information very quickly from a reliable source. because that's going to be the game changer. And to have a tools that will be searching the right sources, or be able to prompt the tool to search it from the correct way, because that's the future. Now you don't really need to remember all of these things. You can just, but you need to be able to use the knowledge. That's what makes you smart. But you don't need to necessarily spend endless hours remembering every single thing. You need to have an understanding about the processes, how they work, logic, physiology, rather than memorizing, which I think is good.
I think that another use potentially
Yeah.
in the future in training is to implement the trainees' weaknesses. So a video that is the recording of a procedure can be read again interpreted by AI, and it can analyze which one are the weaknesses. For example, the economics of movements. So how many steps did that trainee take compared to a standard or an expert video? How many steps, how many movements did it take to do that step? So this, of course, why would we need AI to do this instead of simply telling the registrar, okay, watch this video and figure it out on your own. This is the video of an expert doing an MMA. This is how you should do it. Because we are all different. So, and each operation is different, with each anatomy is different. So there is so much variability that you need a powerful tool such as a deep learning machine that is able to read, detect, and tell you something about that video that is unique of that video. So managing all of this information, we need deep learning machines to do it. I found, if it's not in the field of rhinology, but it is in robotics, in head and neck surgery. They are doing some work here in Guy's Hospital, where in robotics they want to try to see the economics of movements and try to create a potential library of how many steps and movement, it should take you to do that step. Because of course we're always talking about fields that are relatively small, in which bleeding can obscure the view and everything gets slower. So the quicker you are, the better it is. But it's not just saying it, it's calculating it. So I think that this is interesting, and I mean, it's gonna
learn from gamers.
Yeah, exactly.
I suppose on that topic, what do you think are some of the biggest risks, or do you think there's any ethical concerns with AI, using AI in rhinology, for example?
Many. So first of all, the persuasive language and the self-confirmation bias, where you will, it will not really be devil's advocate, but it will always agree with your opinion. And in medicine, your opinion might be a wrong treatment, right? So it will just reassure you that what you want to do or what you think is correct. And you would normally question yourself, but you will just carry on. And I think this is very important because there are uses which are like legally approved or FDA approved, but then the majority of the use is actually not that. The majority of the use is that you see the patient, you're not entirely sure, you will just take a picture and ChatGPT whatever, and then it will give you generate some opinion. And then if you're not an expert in that particular field, that opinion will be wrong and you will not recognize it, and then you will treat or diagnose the patient wrongly, manage the patient wrongly. So this is, I think, at the base level, the biggest risk on daily basis, that it will give you the false reassurance. Then another risk is the black box. We don't understand how the AI got to that outcome, and that's a real problem. We like that when you on a more simple level, you like to look into the program, how it was coded. I don't know, Python, for example, and you can see how the algorithm achieved that particular outcome. But in AI, we don't see that anymore, and that's a big problem. So we cannot control it well. You've got offline systems that got limited abilities. That's how we do it. But as the demand or complexity is growing, I think this is going to be a major problem. Then ethically, for example, with the pictures, so who owns the pictures, right? So there's always a problem. Is it the patient or is it the hospital? And then AI needs to learn from those pictures. It needs to learn from endoscopic pictures from the surgery or from the investigation. You need to load it with countless pictures, endoscopic images or videos, for it to be able to learn, so the quality is going to be good. And who owns that, right? Maybe there's going to be a face visible at some point when you remove the scope, and so there will be some identifiers that were not removed, and so on. Then if you dictate, for example, you have a personal data, and so that's another ethical problem. And then reliance. You will just stop educate yourself. You will stop reading journals. You will ask AI simply to generate you information about, I don't know, CRS with nasal polyps, what is the treatment? You will not read EPOS, you will just ask GPT to give you the information from EPOS. But in reality, you will be using free to use software, which is not going to be maybe as eloquent, and it will give you wrong information. You're just going to go, you will not cross-check it. And that's the problem. The reliance is the issue. On day-to-day basis, I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I think that also another problem of using AI in our field is that there is a problem with the generalizability of the answers, of the outcomes that AI provides you. Because as Pavol was saying, who owns the responsibility for that generalized outcome? Because once we accept that with AI, we get to a conclusion, who's responsible for that conclusion? And if we do not know, just as Pavol was mentioning the black box problem, if we do not know why each decision was made, how can we rely on the final decision? And of course, the machine gets to that decision generalizing information that have been given to the machine while we trained the machine.
And then also, when you look at the studies, which are, for example, looking at radiological findings analysis, and you see these fantastic results, which are usually better against the radiologist, or very often, for example, still radiologists will be better than the AI. The issue is that, for example, if you look at these studies, they will put together the world's biggest experts in the radiology field on that particular topic, and then compare it against the AI. But in real life, you're not the biggest radiology expert, or your colleague is not the biggest radiology expert, and so also the outcomes of these studies are slightly skewed. That you will have then actually AI will be more reliable than your colleague, because your colleague is not really the top notch in the class, in the world. It's not a world class, and then on a regular daily basis, having the AI which is maybe slightly worse than the top radiologist is actually better in the high volume of cases where you're not going to miss in the big numbers, incidental cancers and so on. I don't think it's going to necessarily in the future get better. It might actually even get worse, because this black box problem will deepen with the complexity of the AI. What at the moment, for example, in the companies is happening is that the AIs are checking the AI. So you will have a several layer of AI. You will have an AI that will be specialized in the statistics, for example. Second AI focusing on the different aspects of methodology, writing, and so on. And then you will have another layer of AI that will be checking the outcome of these AIs, and then another layer. And so this is also the way how we can check it, but again, the human input is limited, and all of this is becoming complex and chaotic. When it comes to patients' health, that's a big problem. When it comes to finance, it's a bit more abstract. But when it comes to missed cancers, it's a bit more clear. And I think this is where the FDA, this is the reason why the FDA approvals are missing for most of these tools, because you cannot ensure that in the future AI will not go wild and change the algorithm which worked initially in the testing period.
Just like the self-driving cars. There is the same the same dilemmas and ethical problems behind them.
So you've got a car, and you have the opportunity. You can hit, and how it's going to make a decision, and so that's the problem, because then eventually the car will face these decisions if it's fully AI.
I think it's high stakes. I suppose is what we're trying to get at here, really, in that rare but missed things can have catastrophic effects on an individual patient, similar to self-driving cars, I guess, really, so yeah.
Next question, what is your advice for someone wanting to start an AI-based rhinology project?
I will give you examples. So for example, now we are running a study on the MRI scans. So we are looking at how many patients who had MRI scan because of loss of smell, anosmia, had the correctly positive finding of the mass. In other words, if it's worth organizing the MRI scans, because in most of cases they are just negative, and in vast majority of patients, the hypothesis is it's simply just not worth the amount of money you spend on that. And so if you want to do that, so obviously first of all you need to speak with the IT department, because you need to get approvals to get you all the written text from the radiologists from the past. This way you can have a massive database that can be analyzed with the AI system and native language processing system in a very short period of time. Then you need to, the problem with this one is that you need to teach the AI what is correct and what is incorrect, what is normal and what is abnormal, because the AI will not consistently do that across the whole group. It will you will see the variations. So then you need to basically teach the AI how to think, what is abnormal, what is normal, what is the gray zone, what is not the gray zone. So let's say if you will have a 1,000 patients cohort, out of that you need at least on 100 patients, you need to teach the AI how to think. So this is the real life scenario, but then once you do that, you can expand it into whatever number of patients, and it will speed up the process really well. Then another aspect, if you want to start with AI, is for example to start with the machine learning, which is not really AI, but you can look at the massive databases that are already out there from the past. For example, your hospital in the past analyzed massive cohort of chronic rhinosinusitis patients. They used the methodology which was which was obsolete. Now you can take the same data set that you already have, and you can use the AI to optimize the statistical methodology. For example, apply on machine learning on that, or actually you can apply AI thinking processes on that. So you don't have to invent the wheel, you can just assess and use what you already have. And very often you do have a massive cohorts that was in the past, they were analyzed with the old systems. Yeah, so I think, and then obviously patient leaflets, that's a standard one. There's quite a lot of work on that. Patients, they love to have a individualized leaflets, so you can actually do that straight ahead, because ethically that's also easy. You just basically need approval from the hospital that these are acceptable.
Yeah, these are all really good ideas.
Have you done any AI research, Rory, or Mauthe yourself?
I haven't done any research in AI and rhinology as of yet. However, it is an area I do see myself doing research on in the future, as I think there's so many opportunities to do research in this area. And also, as you've discussed already, so far there are many potential applications for AI in our specialty. So I think it's something I'll be really looking at doing in the future. What about you, Tina?
Yeah, but based on machine learning, detecting polyps and edematous mucosa in endoscopic findings. But we're rather at the start right now, so.
But yes, it's not completely AI, but machine learning, for example, is a methodology which is way more accurate than the multi-regression analysis. You need to have a sufficient number of variables and massive cohort for that. But then you can analyze the process in many layers, take into account the variables in different layers, and give it different importance. And then the outcome is way more accurate, which tends to be variable or binary. Or you can change, for example, with the clustering methods, you can use it to change the classification. Like, for example, we use the clustering methods to change the classification of chronic rhinosinusitis with polyps or without polyps into TH pathways. So you can use machine learning and apply to the existing cohorts. And I think this is extremely useful because you cannot really easily get these big numbers, big massive data sets, but you can use it on the existing ones. Or at the moment, together with the AI, what we see is that hospitals in general, they have got a very good data system. In King's College Hospital, we have got CoxTech, which has got millions and millions of patients' data, and they are now revolutionizing mental health research. So they are applying the machine learning methods on the massive data sets of patients who with mental health problems, and they are now changing the management pathways. And so the same can be applied to rhinology, especially, for example, in the fields where we got a lot of biomarkers. Chronic rhinosinusitis would be absolutely perfect for that. So you need high volume of patients and a lot of variables, essentially something which looks from the outside like a chaos, but is not. For example, with the snacks, right? We have already typically, so there is a beautiful paper which apply the clustering methods on that. So now we see that we don't have just a snack family. Based on the methylation, we can create the clusters, and we learned that they respond differently to the treatments. And so now something would be in the past only snack. Now we can predict that the patient will not respond well to chemoradiotherapy, and it will be better to operate on the patient. So all these I would definitely investigate whether you have got you can lay hands on the big databases. That's what you need. A lot of numbers, a lot of patients.
I think that probably my answer is very, very simpler compared to Pavol and Pavol's experience. But I think that when starting, I think that it's important to have a broad idea, or maybe even more detailed idea of what AI is. Because we say AI, but it's actually, it comprises so many different tools. So deep learning, so neural networks, they are a part of AI. And within the neural networks, we have the deep and the superficial neural networks. And they are different machines. They're used for different things. Deep neural networks, the famous deep learning, includes some of the tools that we have already talked about, like the convolutional neural networks, or like NLPs, like natural language processing. So all of these tools, they're not the same. So if I imagine to start a project, I would like to know what are the exact machines that I need. So this is something that probably I would consider at the very beginning.
So, Francesca and Pavol, I have a question about the future of AI in rhinology. I suppose there's been a lot of talk about the potential for AI to take over certain people's jobs in society. Do you think there's a potential that potentially AI could take over the role of a rhinologist in the future?
Now, if we start from the end surgery, I think that will be the last one to stand still. I think that will be difficult to substitute surgeons, the manual jobs in general. That's a bit too complex. Now we can see the AI robots that can run faster than humans. I mean, we can clearly see that they're able of complex processes, complex movements. But I think the surgery is a combination where it becomes too complex. It's not just about movement, it's also about performing the movements in a very specific scenario which changes, and expertise is needed. But when it comes to diagnostics, there's a different story. I think there will be a machine where your patient will come to the room, will, have a blood taken by the machine that will analyze quickly all the biomarkers, have a biopsy from the mucosa inside of the nose. You will fill the questionnaire prompts, maybe some additional specific questions, and it will give you the output that's going to be tailor-made treatment. So I think this is actually the real life scenario, and the referral will be made by the GP, which is going to be definitely AI. And then I think we are leading to at some point, maybe decades, I don't know, where we will be mainly focusing on the more of a tertiary work. But then I think the question is how to get to that stage of being tertiary specialist. In order to be tertiary specialist, you need to go through the training. You need to see high number of basic patients with basic problems. But if those patients will be seen by AI only, how are you going to gain that expertise? So so it's not black and white, but in the end what matters are the outcomes and the patient's health. If the AI will be superseding the humans, then I think it will be difficult to justify the presence of the humans. So I think we just need to always do a great job to keep ourselves employed.
And also, probably this will be the future, but it will be the future in real life, in medicine, if we are able to solve the responsibility problem. Because this is all something that probably from a technological point of view, in Cupertino, they already have it. But who is responsible for that decision? So if there is a mistake, who's going to be responsible? The manufacturer or the hospital? So unless we find a solution to this, AI is not going to be the protagonist or the substitute, but it's going to be simply an assistant.
Until the point of complete separation of AI and humans, I think there will be always a physician that will have to sign under the outcome and look at the results, what was analyzed. And it needs to be transparent and clear enough that we'll be able to understand quickly how the outcome was made. But back to your question, individual trade. So there'll be a lot of positives. We'll be able to analyze high volume of data into a individualized treatment plan. And so yes, definitely it's the future. We can erase the boring automated processes, triaging systems that we when we're triaging the patients. Will not have to do it anymore, thank God. But I don't think there will be AI surgeons operating soon. That is quite a tricky one.
So probably among all the possibilities, image detection and interpretation of images is going to be probably the one that will be more sooner available, along with the radiological interpretation, but it's still image detection. So probably those will be the first ones that we will have available.
Okay, it's interesting to hear how it's going to have more of an impact on certain areas, and how certainly the technical surgical aspect in rhinology is actually relatively sheltered from AI at present. However, I guess we'll have to see what the future holds. On that note, that brings today's podcast to an end. Pavol, Francesca, you've given us some really interesting insights and experiences on how AI is already having an impact on rhinology and how that could continue to develop in the future. I'd like to thank you both so much for coming onto the podcast, and also to my great co-host Tina, who's had some really interesting questions to ask you.
Thank you so much, Rory, for having us.
Thank you for having us. And I hope it is useful. And we'll see, maybe we can listen to this in 10 years. How much of these predictions were true?
Yeah.
Time will certainly tell. To our listeners, until next time.